Well, good afternoon. Welcome to our fall version of CAAAC. And you can see already, and perhaps you saw in our email, that we're trying something new today. So we've never experienced this before, so neither have you, so we're all just going to join this little experiment together. What we're trying to do is make this more accessible to more people. We're trying to save you some travel dollars if we can. We do really enjoy those of you who have decided to come and be with us in person today. That helps us a great deal. So as an added bonus to that, if you're here in person, just like last time, Liz brought some cookies. And I decided today that from henceforth, we will call those, instead of cookies, we'll call them khakis. But you already know there's a problem with that as well. Huh? So kind of like my Dockers, and so that just takes us all offline, doesn't it? So at any rate, here we are. A couple of housekeeping measures before we really launch. First of all, we have stationed microphones around the room. Now the reason for that is so that people can hear you when you ask a question or when you speak up. They are live all the time. If you need to mute it out because you want to say something particularly encouraging, then you need to push and hold the button, okay? Otherwise they're going to be live all the time. We're going to have all of our speakers come up here behind the podium. While we don't really prefer that because it feels like it isolates us a bit from you, it allows us to get front and center before the camera. So this is being web streamed today, even a little bit further along than what we did in our last CAAAC meeting. And on that note, if you're on the phone right now, or if you're hooked up and watching the stream, if you could in the future, just let us know what you think. We are really hungry for some feedback. Once again, we really want this to be a valuable experience. And if there's anything we can do to make this better, we will sure give it a try. We've got a great team. You can see them, those of you who are in the room, working hard right now to make this work out for all of us. So we're going to keep trying to make that a better and better effort as we move along. So you can see the agenda in front of you, hopefully. And basically, we're going to break our meeting up today into 4 parts. First of all, we're going to have a little time of welcome and introduction just so we know one another. Please don't be embarrassed by that. It's just valuable, I think, for us to connect a little bit, and that's part of our motive for getting together. So we'll practice that in just a moment. Following that, we want to give you some updates on some things that are true or have been true going on in the air quality world. And we recognize that not all of these items will apply to everybody all the time. But together, between that and then the third item on our agenda, really does represent the air quality world right now in all of its breadth, or in much of its breadth anyway. So we'll be sharing a lot of things with you. If you have questions about anything at any time, please speak up. Any of our speakers, presenters, or anybody gathered around the room would be glad to respond to that. That's why we're here. We're not here just to make presentations at you. We'd really like to engage with you. So that's going on. But we will reserve some extra time at the very end. If you have other comments, if there's things you'd like to hear from us in the future, those kinds of things, we'll do that at the very end too. All right? So that launches us right into this time of welcome and introductions. We'll use this background through much of our presentation today. This is obviously an organizational chart for our bureau, for the Air Quality Bureau here at DEQ. And this does 2 things for you. We'll show you a little more detail in the future in just a couple of minutes. But we want you to see where everybody lives. So when each of our speakers come forward, we're going to show you specifically who they are and where they exist in our bigger structure. Along those lines, my name is Hobie Rash. If you don't know me already, I'm a program manager over here on the right side of our program. And I'm a program manager for permitting for what we now call field services. Some of you know us as compliance. And for our oil and gas registration program. So that's my role, other than being kind of Vanna White for CAAAC. Although, go ahead, you can laugh. That's altogether appropriate. For that organizational chart, if you go to our website, to our CAAAC website, which you actually can access now, which I think is a wonderful thing, if you go down all the way to the bottom, if you can click on that link on the bottom, you will get a more developed organizational chart that looks like this. And I'll show you this for 2 reasons. One, up at the top it shows you that with each position we've added all their contact information. So if you want to get a hold of any of us at any time, this is a great way to do it, because perhaps even if you don't know us by name, you can say, well, I want to talk to somebody in planning, or I want to talk to somebody in permitting, or I want to talk to the head of permitting, or I want to talk to the head cheese guy. And that'll show you how to get hold of us, either via email or telephone. The other thing that this organizational chart will do for you is it shows you where each of us is in the offices that we maintain around the state. So as you can see at the bottom there, we have most of our folks are here in the Metcalf building in Helena. We have some of our staff over near the airport in Helena. Our monitoring team is over there. Our oil and gas section is centered or led from the Butte Field office, but we also have staff in both field services and oil and gas now in Billings. 3 staff in our oil and gas are now in Billings. And then also one of our field inspectors is in Missoula. So the organizational chart will help you with that as well as we move along. All right, so now's that time where we all panic and wonder what to do. But I've already led the way, right? So I'm Hobie Rash. So Gordon, if you wouldn't mind, would you just start off and let us know who you are and where you're from?
Sure, I'm Gordon Criswell from Talon Energy.
Jim Parker, Talon, Montana.
Beth Steinmetz with Northwestern Energy. Karen Helfrich with Pioneer Technical Services. Peggy Trank with Treasure State Resources Association.
Dave Dahl, I'm a consultant with Browning, CAAAC, Berry, and Holman.
Kevin Matthews with Bison Engineering.
Rebecca Harbridge with DEQ.
Now this becomes harder to hear. If you're not in the room, you can't see this, but we have quite a few of our staff here and most of our presenters are already present. So we're going to ask you, if you wouldn't please just pull up to the mic and let folks know who you are as well.
Hi, I'm Julie Merkel, the Permitting Section Supervisor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dave Clem, Air Quality Bureau Chief.
Kristen Martin, the Air Quality Meteorologist. I'm Julie Ackerlin, the newest member of the Air Quality Bureau. I'm a planner.
Doug Kinsley, Research and Monitoring Section Supervisor.
Dave McGarry, Montana DEQ Oil and Gas Services Section.
Dan Walsh, I'm the Field Services Supervisor.
I'm Liz Ulrich, and I'm the Analysis and Planning Services Section Supervisor.
And Ann Williams, Technical Support Services Program Manager.
I'm John Podolinsky. I'm with the Department of Small Business Environmental Assistance Program.
Nancy Davis, Data Management Section.
Very good. Thank you all. That's helpful. That truly is, and hopefully we'll do more of that in the future. Along with those introductions, Julie already introduced herself as one of our newest members, so I'm going to go ahead and... Oh, pardon me. You're absolutely... I was just reminded I didn't ask for anybody on the phone. So first error on my part today. If anybody's on the phone, could you just take a moment and introduce yourself as well?
Ann Hedges with the Montana Environmental Information Center.
Thank you.
Ronnie Flannery with the American Lung Association in Montana, based in Missoula.
Thank you.
Jeff Briggs with Ash Grove Cement.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hi, this is Jocelyn Dobrainer with the Environmental Protection Agency in Denver.
Hi.
Hi.
Raven Elliott with Oasis Petroleum.
Good afternoon. Somebody else there too?
Kevin Irvin, Montana Utility Utilities.
Good afternoon. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Rich Ayala with Kinder Morgan out of Lakewood, Colorado.
Hi, Rich. Anyone else? All right, very good, thank you. That gives me an opportunity as well to tell you how desperately we need Rebecca to keep me out of trouble all the time. So you can see why, it was just a clear indication, right? Also, I'm going to introduce Liz again. So the 3 of us, Liz Ulrich, form our CAAAC team. So as we go through, if you have comments or suggestions in the future, please get hold of any of us. We'd be glad to talk to you about that. All right, started to introduce Julie again, so let's go there. Julie's been with us just a little while now. How long now, Julie, do you know?
Starting my 4th week.
4th week. So we are pretty proud of Julie. We just feel like we are incredibly fortunate to have her on team here. Comes to us with lots of good air quality background. Is going to work with us in our planning section. And if you're familiar with things that have been going on here, planning is just burgeoning in our world, and we'll talk some more about that in just a moment as Liz comes forward. Another new employee who's not here today, and whose face you can't see, even if you're present in the room, is Chris Green. Chris is going to be another specialist in our oil and gas services section. He's located in our billings office, so we now have 3, as I mentioned earlier, compliance inspectors in billings with the oil and gas services section, as well as 3 folks in our field services section. Excuse me, I'm confusing even myself now. So 2 new employees. I think you'll enjoy working with both of them. Chris also comes to us with a great deal of field experience, which was very appealing to us. That's a lot of what we want him to do from the billings office, is interact more and more and more with our field folks, our production folks out in the oil and gas world. So pretty excited about that as he gets his feet underneath him and launches for us. He's already been out in the field just a little bit. And with that, then, we're going to launch into our Bureau updates for you. So first of all, we're going to introduce you again, our Bureau Chief, Dave Klemp. Recently, our program was reviewed by the Environmental Quality Council Interim Committee. So Dave's going to talk a bit about that and about legislature as well.
All right, thank you, Hobie. Good afternoon, everyone. First off, I do want to echo what Hobie stated. I think this is outstanding. CAAAC into the 21st century, and these meetings are vitally important to us, and I very much appreciate the effort of staff, in particular, Hobie, Rebecca, Liz. They're the leaders of this CAAAC effort, and if you do have any suggestions, please get them to us. We want to make it as meaningful as possible. Legislative update. I have a small part today, which is nice. I get to listen to all of the information that's going to be exchanged. Montana has an every other year session, but for those of us involved in legislature, it's constant. It's year round, and just recently the interim session just completed for the Montana legislature, and I'm not sure who all has seen that, so I wanted to make you aware that the Environmental Quality Council, who oversees a lot of the agency functions, completed its program review of many DEQ programs, including the Air Quality Bureau. We were on the agenda at the beginning part of September. If you go out to EQC's website, you'll see a link to not only the report that was prepared, but the hearing that was held as well. For those of you who don't know, EQC was looking at these reviews. Joe Coleman, who is the legislative staffer for that council, really put together a very nice background of the air quality program, highlighted some of the operations as well as some of the fiscal implications of the Bureau. It's not just enforcement compliance, it's everything in the Bureau. I thought the report went very well. We did get some questions. Smoke is a big issue in this state, something that we're going to be challenged with in the future. The Environmental Quality Council did not put forth any legislation or any topics for legislation, at least at that juncture. That is something that sometimes comes out of the Environmental Quality Council in the interim session. And so moving forward, we will be starting the general session as a state in January, first part of January. And I would imagine for the next couple advisory council meetings, we'll have a standing legislative agenda item to talk about various legislation that might be out there related to air quality or rulemaking or anything that falls under our purview. So I don't have anything right now that I have heard in terms of legislation or any concerns. I understand the budget is going to be hotly debated and will have some pretty significant implications. But in terms, we do not have any bills this year that we would like to put forth. If there are folks who have ideas, input, or through the course of your review on the law's website, you come across something that you think might implicate the Air Quality Bureau in any sense, please let us know. So that's all I wanted to do, was provide a quick update on EQC, put a placeholder for the next CAAAC meeting, talk about legislation, and see if anybody had any questions about legislature, EQC review, or anything like that. Anything on the phone? All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dave. I'll reiterate that Dave's contact information is available for you there, so if questions do come up, Dave leaves the charge with us and sets a standard. We want to be available to you, so I know Dave will take your calls, emails, as questions arise as we move into the legislative session and some things like that. I mentioned to you earlier that our planning world is just growing by leaps and bounds in terms of duties And here to present to you kind of what that's all about is Liz Ulrich. Liz is our section supervisor for planning, and lots to talk about from Liz today. So here we go.
Okay, thanks, Hobie. Like he said, my name is Liz Ulrich. I'm the Analysis and Planning Section Supervisor. My predecessor, just in case you're wondering how I fit into this, was Eric Merchant. So he is still around. He works for the City County Health Department and is more than excited to come back to talk to us whenever we want. But he is doing great. So with that, I was kind of thinking how I was going to start this presentation. And I remembered a trip that I took with my parents to Seattle. We flew, and I'm gonna get a rental car. And my dad pops in, and he's gonna drive. And my mom pops in the passenger seat, and she starts playing with the navigation system. And she is entering the address that we want to go to. We're pretty familiar with the area. We've been there quite a few times. But she enters it anyway. And my dad's cruising along, and we're talking. And pretty soon he takes a turn. And all we hear is recalculating route. And okay, that's fine. So it recalculates. He takes another turn, recalculating route. He's not following this whatsoever. And so pretty soon it keeps happening over and over. He's getting stressed out. My mom is getting way more stressed out than he is. And I am laughing in the back because it's kind of fun, kind of humorous just to observe this whole thing happening. But it happened over and over. Finally, I just see my dad's hand reach out across the steering wheel, across where the navigation system was, and just starts poking buttons. He's still driving, and he's poking, and he's, saying some words to this navigation system, but he was done with it. He was completely done recalculating the route. And by the end of it, we were laughing. It's kind of a running joke because plans change, routes get recalculated, and I think the biggest thing for us, how this correlates here, is that plans do change. In the world of planning, we have to remember to be pretty flexible. EPA is throwing stuff at us all the time. We have new rules, we have statutes, we have new regulations. And our role in the planning section is just to kind of roll with the punches, make our plans, and be able to accommodate when those plans change. So today, I just kind of want to give you, I hope this is the right button, a little update in the planning world. I like this quote, "A good plan is like a roadmap. It shows the final destination and usually the best way to get there." So again, we have to have some flexibility in some of the things that we do. First item up is the Board of Environmental Review meeting. It's on Friday, so it's coming up rather quickly. We have 2 items going before the board, and those are the only 2 items that we have for the rest of the year. Planned out. The first one is our incorporation by reference. It's an annual update that we do. We go and review the Code of Federal Regulations, Montana statutes, administrative rules in Montana, see what's changed, see what applies to our air quality program, and then ask the board to incorporate those changes into our rules. We are in the adoption phase of that rulemaking. There isn't anything really significant, no major quado updates or anything like that. It's pretty mellow this time around. We do have information available if you'd like to see what those changes are. And then the second item that we have is our annual fee report. In our rules, we report to the board any upcoming fee changes that we might see in the next year, and we don't have anything. And of course, you guys being our stakeholder group, we're going to bring those things before you guys first, before we ever bring anything to the Board of Environmental Review. The next big project that we have in my section is redesignation of non-attainment areas. This is our list of non-attainment areas in the state. And it's quite a big list. If it was up to me, I would just go and we would just be submitting redesignation packages and all over the place, but we have to be a little more strategic with our resources. And following, or on the tail of the Billings SO2 non-attainment area redesignation, we decided that we're going to go with the Laurel SO2 area. We are currently in progress. That's been something we've been working on for a while. And following that, we'll go ahead and look at the East Helena SO2 area and the East Helena lead area. Those are the ones that we kind of have selected. We've been working on those, and we will definitely keep you up to date when we decide to do further areas, and if we have any issues with it, or if we have any questions for you guys about it. Yeah.
So, all those particulate things, are they all smoke?
Wood smoke, a lot of wood smoke. We also have some PM10 areas, maybe some road dust. A lot of these, I won't say a lot, but I mean, most of these are over 2 or 3 decades old. They've been attaining the standard for a long time. A lot of these roads have been paved. A couple of instances, there was actual road construction going on when these exceedances happened. So we feel it should be a fairly easy go for the redesignation. It's just the process with EPA that will be timely.
So is the same true for Laurel, East Helena, and Billings on the SO2? Is that process more difficult?
We just have to show compliance with the standards. I don't know as if it's more difficult, just more resource intensive. I'm hoping that the Laurel SO2 should definitely be done by the end of the year. East Helena, I can see following the same. It's once we have Laurel done, because we still have a source there, it's a little bit more complicated than East Helena where we don't have a source of emissions. So we hope East Helena will be a little bit quicker process. The next thing, so we talked about redesignations. Now we have some designation work that we've been doing. Last year, October, EPA revised the ozone NAAQS from 75 ppb down to 70 ppb. And yesterday we submitted our initial designations for the 2015 ozone NAAQS to EPA. We designated 8 counties in Montana as attainment. Those are the ones highlighted up on the screen. We were able to designate them as attainment because we have monitors in those areas. The remaining counties, we are asking for designation of attainment / unclassifiable. And all that is that we don't have monitors. But this was good. We don't have any places that are exceeding the standard. Oh, and this one's hard to see, the colors up there. But the saga of the 2010 1-hour sulfur dioxide designation process continues. We all know that we redesignated the area around the Billings non-attainment area. Via the data requirements rule for the 2010 1-hour sulfur dioxide primary NAAQS, the Colstrip Steam Electric Station was identified as an applicable source because it exceeds the 2,000 tons per year applicability threshold. Through modeling, we determined that Colstrip facility is an attainment. And then since it is the only facility in Rosebud County is in turn shows attainment. And so if you can see, I've got, hard to see on this, but Richland County, Rosebud County, Yellowstone, and Lewis and Clark. We are going to be asking for the designation of attainment in those 4 counties. Rosebud due to the modeling that we did at Colstrip. And then the other 3, Richland, Yellowstone, and Lewis and Clark, we have monitors there that showed attainment. So we hope to get that designation request out for public comment in October, and then hopefully soon to EPA after that. So what else have we been busy with? Well, rules. Lots of regulations. We've seen new rules for landfills, MSW landfills. We've also seen a new lead NAAQS, a revised. It stayed the same, but still going to take some effort on our part. We've seen revisions to the exceptional events rule. All of these are very time consuming, but again, we're just starting on these. We'll definitely keep you up to date when we come up with more meat to these plans and how they're going to affect air quality programs, and we'll let you know. what we decided to do with these. So is there any questions? It's kind of a lot of information. Yeah.
One, regarding the ozone.
Yeah.
Designations.
Mhm.
A while back, I had a discussion with your predecessor, Eric,
Yeah.
about ozone. This was before, a rule was actually out, but he indicated that due to the monitoring that we had across the state, that he felt, and I think a lot of people agreed, that Montana was near background ozone.
Mhm.
And I think there was going to be some input to EPA and others in regard to that. But have you guys gotten any feedback on background levels in general and where we sit in relation to background levels? I mean, in relation to our thought at one time that we were background.
And we're still very close to those background levels. Does anybody else want to field this? Or have input? Oh, look, Mr. Klump.
Yeah, Jim, that's an excellent question. For those on the phone, this is Dave Klemp, and I think this is one of those areas where the conversation has been evolving over several years. And I first want to say, when you use the term background, we need to look at what background is versus what transport might be from other anthropogenic sources in other states, upwind, maybe even other countries. And so I don't know that we have the specific answer as to whether or not ozone in Montana is a result of background, which I believe it's predominantly, or how much is transported in. Bottom line for the designations is right now, we're with the standard of 70, we're in pretty good. I think our around 58, I think, is on average for all of the counties where we have monitors. That's what we're seeing. I would fully expect this conversation about background transport to further evolve, which is the reason I kind of wanted to weigh in. This is one of those standards, along with fine particulate and ozone. If I was to rub the crystal ball, this will be one that every 5 years, as EPA reviews the NAACs, we might be in a situation in 5 years having this exact same conversation over a different number.
Is there anything else? Thank you.
I think you can see why we're only giving Liz and her team every third weekend off. Otherwise, they just work constantly. And they're bringing in sleeping bags, staying the night. There's lots to do, and they're doing a tremendous job with that. One of the main features of living in Montana in the summertime, and something we all talk about, something we all experience, and some people suffer through, is summer wildfire season. And we have a team of folks that we're very, very proud of, who devote a lot of energy through the summertime to dealing with this issue. At least folks from at least 3 of our sections in the Bureau deal with it almost constantly through the summertime, especially when it's very bad. And so in representation of that, and hopefully, I'm not even going to knock on wood, smoke season is over for this year. And Kristen Martin, our meteorologist, is going to come and share with us a little bit of a recap, what we saw this past season, and some interesting features of that. So Kristen, come.
Tell me to make it real low. Being 5'1" makes it tough to be up here. So thank you, Hobie. As he said, I'm the air quality meteorologist. So I do all the wildfire smoke updates during the summer and into the fall sometimes. And so I'm going to talk about what we saw this past wildfire season. So here in Montana, we had about 100,000 acres burned and 108 flagged events, and I will explain that in a moment, and 7 days in which those flagged events, the 24-hour average exceeded the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So what does that mean, and why do you care about that? As probably most of you know, that 24-hour level is 35 micrograms per meter cubed. And a flagged event for us is any event where we think that PM 2.5 levels were elevated due to wildfires in the state. That flagged event becomes part of an exceptional events package that we then submit to EPA. And exceptional events are those that are considered not reasonably controllable or preventable. And so when we submit that package to EPA, if they concur that those dates were impacted by wildfires, they are removed from the record so they don't hurt us for designations and redesignations and things like that. So, where does this year rank in past years? This is the acres burned. So we've certainly had worse years in Montana for the number of acres burned, but I always look at this and see kind of a cyclical pattern that happens for wildfire acreage in Montana. And then this is the number of flagged events we have every day or every year. And so you can see that it trends pretty well with more acres burned, more flagged events. Some exceptions being down at the beginning, not supposed to walk too far. Down at the, earlier on the chart, we had a lot of burned acreage, but not too many flagged events, and that could be if we have a lot of burns in eastern Montana where our monitoring network is more sparse, and so burns are not impacting the monitors as much. And then earlier, the past few years, we've had a lot more flagged events than we've had acres burned in the state, and that's because we've had a lot of smoke traveling from other states, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, sometimes California, and Canada as well. So, going back to May, we had very low fire activity here in the US, but as most of you probably remember, the Fort McMurray fire up in Canada burned 1.5 million acres, and the whole town had to be evacuated. And smoke did intermittently come down and impact eastern Montana during that event. In June, it was cool and wet, which I love to happen in June. So I don't have to start my smoke updates too early. We didn't really have any big fires that caused a lot of impacts. We had a fire near Hamilton, the observation fire, that burned about 1,500 acres, but we had no days above that national ambient air quality standard in June. So July and August, they were really good until the very last weekend. And down here at the bottom, you can see in Hamilton, so this calendar is showing you the health effect category for each day along with that 24-hour value. So if it's green, it means it's good air quality. Orange and red mean that that air quality has exceeded the standard. So I'm gonna let me hit play. I'll talk about this. So, and the big story at the end of July was this Roaring Lion fire right next to Hamilton. There was evacuations needed. It burned 3,000 acres very quickly, and I think it's worth watching just to see the challenges that we have here and how quickly we can see some very serious impacts. And this was over the course of about 2 to 3 hours that this happened. So yeah, certainly something that the day started out very well down there and it ended very differently. Or maybe I can. Right. Okay, so in August, we had the Copper King fire near Thompson Falls. And this actually started the same day as that Roaring Lion fire. But we didn't really see many impacts from this fire until later in August when it had a run a couple weeks later and grew, I think, about 20,000 acres in a weekend. And this had significant impacts to Thompson Falls. We put up a monitor, or Doug's group put up a monitor on the 24th, and you can see from when we put it up, we immediately were seeing unhealthy air quality levels. And that monitor, which this picture was taken by the monitoring guy when he set it up, is now going to be permanent. And then the last thing were the impacts near Yellowstone National Park. They started in August and lasted until about the second weekend in September. It was right next to our West Yellowstone town, and we saw hourly levels reach hazardous, and it's the highest levels I've seen since I've been here for hourly readings. So yeah, that is the wildfire season, and it kind of can be summarized by pretty good overall for the whole state, but isolated impacts in some towns that had very significant impacts from it. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Crystal. Lots of work goes into that, and it's very important for the citizens, I think, of the state of Montana as we work through the summer and into our open burning seasons. It's my personal opinion, so let me qualify that, right? Everybody underline that. My personal opinion that one day when I'm sitting in my rocking chair on my front porch drinking coffee, we'll look back to this year, 2016, and say this was a watershed year in the world of air quality, and particularly, I think, air quality in the state of Montana. And some of the reasons for that you've already heard, principally from Liz, as we look at the way our world is changing, our regulatory environment is changing around us. But also then the way we're funded and the way we have to proceed on into the future. I think we're going to see one day that 2016, a lot of things began to change. And in anticipation of that, we as a Bureau are trying to crystal ball just a little bit and prepare ourselves. I call it frame up. We can't build the whole house, but we want to frame up a little bit of what we think our future might be and how we can adapt and address new air quality issues, which we've not experienced in the past, new regulations being imposed on us on a federal level, and new and changing industrial sources in our state. And also with that, then, something profoundly important that we've been trying to do for a long, long time, and that is communicate to the public, the citizenry of the state of Montana, most principally at present about air quality impacts due to fine particulate matter in the air. And our next presenter is going to talk to us about a project that he's taken the lead on that is taking us into this new century, this new era of air quality management in the state of Montana. He'll be followed by several others with similar purpose in mind. So I just want to say that we're shifting gears just a little bit. In a sense, what we just said was this is kind of where we've been, where we are today. What we're about to talk about more is here's where we're headed quite a bit. And please, once again, entertain any questions that you have as each of these speakers come. So Doug Kinsley is going to come. Doug's our supervisor of monitoring and has some talk about today's air.
Thank you, Hobie. Again, my name is Doug Kinsley, and I must start and offer an apology if my wife is watching, because I tried to fix this collar and get it to lay down, but it just would not be able to. I tried my best, so I'm sorry. So, as Hobie mentioned, I'll be talking about the Today's Air Update project. Most of you are likely familiar with what Today's Air and what it has to offer, but I just want to provide a brief little setup as to the content and resources presented within Today's Air. But essentially, this website is the main gateway for disseminating information or fine particulate matter related information to the public. Basically, this is in the form of reported fine particulate matter concentration values from each of the monitoring sections as represented in that previous map by a dot. Fine particulate matter basically being defined as particulate matter that is 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. In addition to reporting those hourly values, essentially we assign exposure-related health impact assessments to each hour that is represented. And basically we do that by comparing this to the health fix breakpoint category that's already defined, and wherever those concentrations fall, that is how that particular value is assigned in terms of its health impacts or health assessments. And additionally, today's air supports smoke and other health-related information, particularly in terms of DEQ's efforts. Our biggest, best example is winter air quality updates and wildfire smoke updates that Kristen Martin prepares. Just a little note here, provide some context. So today's air website is hit on an average during the wildfire season. Well, I'll say for this particular wildfire season, more than 60,000 individual hits through the course of the month of August. Keep in mind, if you recall Kristen's year-to-date acres burned for 2016 in comparison to the prior years is not as significant as it has been, but that still is a considerable amount of activity. Even in the off months, say in March or October, we're still seeing 8,000 hits a month. So it is a very prominent website. It is viewed more than double from what I've last checked in comparison to the rest of DEQ's website. So significant traffic. So with that, the objective of today's air is to provide accurate and timely technical data and health impact information related to particulate matter, mainly fine particulate matter. As far as our audiences, obviously local, state, environmental, and public health agencies use this, and it's invaluable in terms of instructing and informing the public as to the impacts of smoke events, whether it be wildfire or wintertime inversions. Also, they use that in issuing air quality alerts and restrictions, mainly during the wintertime season, but certainly wildfire events would trigger air quality alerts. And also, it can guide their policy and regulations towards dealing with fine particulate matter. And particularly within the last few years, we have been dealing a lot with athletic directors and coaches in terms of no-go decisions for athletic events. Kristen Martin is, especially during wildfire season, is continuously in conversation with various athletic directors. Of course, they want her to make the call in terms of whether they're going to, have practice or travel to Kalispell to have a game. So she's got a lot of pressure there, but she does a good job. And of course, the general public uses this information for their daily or just for general health decisions and activity-related decisions. Today's air, the emphasis has always been that we provide a website that's intuitive, easy to navigate, substantive, and understandable. Obviously, we want this information to be conveyed in a manner that's readily available. It's meaningful information, and obviously to be able to grab it quickly and be able to decipher it without a great deal of knowledge or expertise in that matter. So that brings us to the current project. And since its inception, today's air has continuously evolved to just become better at the objectives and the emphasis that I earlier described. And in the past, a lot of these changes or updates were more instructive or descriptive in nature. So we're really doing it's the same message, we're just providing additional context and additional information on how to use the site and a best way to interpret the data. But with this particular project, we are really fundamentally changing how the message is created, not necessarily the mechanism for passing that message along, but the underlying foundation of how that message is generated. And so what that basically means is we're transitioning to EPA's NowCast method in determining essentially what the health effects categorizations are or air quality assessments are for particular readings. And before I dig into that, I just want to kind of briefly go over some of our issues with the current method so you kind of get an understanding of why we're making such a significant change. With the current method, we're incorporating 3 different averaging times and associated health impact breakpoints. So you have the 1 hour, 8 hour, and 24-hour averages that are displayed currently in today's air, the 8 and the 24-hour rolling averages. So intuitively, that can be difficult, especially if you're not a subject matter expert. The general public finds that confusing, and particularly they just want their information to them and telling them what essentially the air quality is for any particular time frame. Secondly, the front map is as far as the characterization of air quality is done by an algorithm, essentially what determines the color of the dot on the map. And the particular aspect of that algorithm lends itself to some issues. The one element is the fact that it displays the worst of the 1, 8, or 24-hour average values on that front page display, which can be misleading in some cases because it doesn't necessarily respond rapidly to quickly changing air quality. It tends to hold on to those longer averaging times, meaning the 8 and the 24-hour rolling average. A second element of it is ingrained in the algorithm is a 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point, which essentially, at any point in time, regardless of what the worst case scenario is presented by the 1 or 8 or 24-hour average, if it's below that 15 microgram cut point, it's going to show green. So that causes erratic characterization of air quality conditions as it bounces back and forth from the 8 or 24 to the 1 hour average. And ultimately, it just leads to today's air in many cases not being representative of what people really see outside. Obviously, you could go into each map or each monitoring station or dot on the map. You can drill down into that information to see exactly what each of those are saying or what each of those are indicating, and that will give you a better idea. But most people just like to look at that front page map and make a decision. So a lot of times it'll be, fairly decent outside, and they look at the map and it's showing unhealthy conditions. And finally, the relevance of the health assessment breakpoints is a little questionable. Particularly the 8 and the 1 hour breakpoints were derived from emission factors used to estimate emissions from stationary sources. So it's obvious to assume that there's some concerns there with using those in health assessments. And 2, the 24-hour average is somewhat obsolete. That was we brought that over from the Washington air quality assessment system, and EPA has invested a lot of effort in recent years in terms of evaluating what the exposures and health impacts are to one particular matter. So on to the NowCast method. So essentially, how the NowCast formula works is it essentially will scale the previous hourly concentrations derived from each of those monitoring stations. So it looks at the 1 hour averages that are generated, takes 12 of those hourly concentrations, scales them, and then applies a weighting factor, and basically that weighting factor will provide an averaging that's based on variability of conditions. So if air quality is stable, being less variable, it will apply an even weighting across that full 12 hours. Where you have more instability and more variability in air quality, it will weight it towards the more recent hours. And here's just a couple examples to give you an idea of comparison and contrast between NowCast and today's air. And Brandon, as I talk about these, can you kind of highlight them with the mouse, or so I can kind of follow along, and I'll try to be as descriptive as possible. So basically what this represents is a day's worth of data from a particular monitoring site. So you have 2 different monitoring sites, and first on the left you have from the Sealy area. So the top portion with the gray background is essentially the raw hourly data, and that is defined by the black line there that Brandon is highlighting. Also, the blue dashed line is the 24-hour average, rolling average from those 24, well, it'll actually carry over from yesterday, but it's basically a rolling 24-hour average from past values. The lines, horizontal line on that gray area in the graph is essentially that 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point that I was talking about earlier. And then on the bottom is essentially the health categorization, and the blue line represents basically what today's air would show on that front map. So again, if you recall from the algorithm, it's going to take the worst of the 1, 8, 24-hour average, and then the 50 microgram per cubic meter cut point will dominate all of those. In this first example, basically this is simulating what you would see on the erratic behavior, where essentially, if you go up to the top graph, you're looking at those hourly concentrations. It starts to improve early in the morning, and then it kind of hovers along that 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point, and then degrades slightly in the afternoon. And if you look down at the bottom where you have the health assessments, essentially there's your oscillation below and above that 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point, with it carrying over some of the averages from that. Most likely is the 8-hour average. So you can see that can create some confusion to folks and some frustrations when they're looking outside. And in this example, it's pretty much hovering around 15 to 20 or 5 to 20, which is really fairly good air quality. Most likely today's air, or if you're just looking at a 1 hour concentration, would show about a moderate to good level. Similar situation on the right-hand side when you're dealing with Bozeman High School. Same situations, oscillating around that 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point. And again, the today's air at the bottom is showing what would be on the front map. And again, you see that spike there early in the morning. That's just kind of an anomaly. It could be accurate, it could be something else. So here we overlay what NowCast would show. When you see it smooths out that response. So it is basically you're not getting that bouncing back and forth between that rolling average and the 15 microgram per cubic meter cut point. So it smooths out the response. It more correlates with what we're seeing on an hourly value. And if you notice on the Bozeman High School example on the left, it is still responsive to those sudden increases when you have a spike in monitored values. Again, a quick example, I won't go through all the details, but essentially this really displays how it holds on to that rolling 24-hour average. So on the left-hand side, that blue dotted line on the top left is the 24-hour rolling average. Again, black lines are the monitored 1 hour values. And then when you go down to what is depicted on the front page of today's air map, you can really see that contrast and where that oscillation or that cut point really drastically emphasizes some of the problems with the current method. And then in reality, when today's air is showing that air quality is poor, air quality is really not that bad. Same example on the other side, except a little inverse, where air quality is actually improving, and today's air map is actually showing air quality degrading. So again, you overlay the NowCast version, and it depicts a much better characterization and representation of what actual conditions are. So essentially what it gives us is NowCast method effectively represents short-term and cumulative exposures. It's responsive to rapidly changing conditions and more representative of actual conditions. And two, you only have a single data point for health categorization, where in this example I show you that is off of the current today's air method, so you have the 1, 8, and 24-hour average. So again, you're dealing with much more data points, and depending on which one you look at, they can tell you a completely different story. So someone who's not necessarily a subject matter expert, that kind of is confounding. So with the NowCast version, you're getting that one data point. Just some additional objectives, as I mentioned, with the amount of traffic that we do receive, and to just the input that we are, through the wildfire and even the wintertime season, we're constantly dealing with county officials, not only dealing with Kristen on forecasting, but also just looking at the data and using that for various functions in their everyday world. So stakeholder input was important to us. So with that, we kicked off a webinar which basically highlighted the changes to today's air that we were proposing, and also we generated a beta test page that allowed stakeholders to look at current today's air side by side with the NowCast version during wildfire season to really get a comparison and contrast of what the two methods offer. Also with these objectives, we wanted to make sure that really the format and appearance of today's air was not going to change drastically. If people are comfortable with today's air, we feel the format and the way it presents the message is effective and valuable. So we wanted to maintain that. And two, with this upgrade, essentially, we added additional features that kind of would portray more information. Obviously, those people who would be more interested in it and would typically dive into some of that data. So there are more elements to it that give you enhanced features and give you a better picture of actually what's going on. I mentioned the beta test version, so in terms of that timing, we tested that July 18th through September 1st. The comment period ended September 15th. We anticipate launching the new version of today's air on November 15th. And in terms of comment we received very few, I think we received one comment, written comment that was really not within the context of the test process, but all in all, we received lots of verbal feedback that was very positive and favorable, so. So with that, any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. One of the advantages of being the leader of our CAAAC team is I have almost unlimited opportunities to editorialize. And I'm going to exercise my prerogative right now and do that in that some of the things that Doug just described to you really embody some principles that we are very strongly promoting within our Bureau. And you don't necessarily see that here, but they're thickly ingrained in everything you just heard and all the things you're about to hear, and even in much of what Liz talked about earlier. One of those is we want to get really excellent. We want to get much better at what we do. Now, that doesn't mean that we feel like we failed miserably in the past, but we feel like we can do even better. And this is, I think, in part representative of that. Over the past 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen a great increase and change in technology that's available to us to acquire ambient monitoring data, to present it in various fashions. What you just saw here, what we will do on into the future, was not possible even 3 years ago. We want to be good at that. We feel the responsibility of that, of getting this information to the public in general. So in terms of our monitoring process and our presentation of data, we want to get better at that. That's a factor that you will hear, I think, in these coming presentations as well. That's core to where we're going after this watershed or in this watershed year. The second component of that I'd just like to call to your attention is the collaborative nature of the way this project got put together. So this wasn't just the monitoring section that pulled this together. This was a collaborative effort within our Bureau of representatives from across the Bureau who had a stake in the way this thing works and how data gets pulled together, and presented. So within the Bureau, it was a collaborative effort, but also Doug already shared to you outside of the Bureau was also a collaborative effort. And for many years, we've been presenting health-based information. In a very new way, we were able to partner, for instance, with the Department of Public Health. And we think that's a major step forward. And collaboratively, we think we give the state of Montana a better product. And we're excited about that. Once again, I hope you'll hear and see those two principles embodied in our next 3 presenters. Now, before we go there, I'm just going to ask you, are you ready for a stretch? We've been here an hour. We'll give you a little break if you're interested in one. If not, we'll just power on through to the end. So please feel free to comment either way. All right, I hear keep going, so that's what we're going to do. Next presentation then is from our Supervisor of Oil and Gas Services section. David Geary is going to come and share a project that he's leading then to review and take us forward in this world of oil and gas.
Thanks, Hobie. I'm not shy to admit this is my first time speaking into a microphone in this venue, and my voice already sounds really weird to me. So, but at least it'll fix my quiet talker syndrome that I seem to have going on. So the mic's probably a good thing for me. Let's see. So really, what I'm here today, last CAAAC meeting, I think it was back in May, we talked about a lot of rural activity at the federal level regarding our upstream oil and gas sources. Some of them, the entire oil and gas sector. And really, I'm just looking at build on that a little bit today and share with you what we've been doing since then. So we'll take a look back. I'll share with you what I hope that the takeaways from that last meeting in May were, and the project that we talked about, and then just letting you know what we've been doing since that last meeting, and where we're going to go from here, or where we feel we need to go from here. So the takeaways really are these are a list of all the federal rules that we kind of talked about. And that's what the takeaway is that we hoped you took away from that list. I mean, there's just a lot of federal rule activity going on within the oil and gas sector. And the yellow things on here are things that we highlighted. I'll go through each one of them real quickly. The first rule that went final, which is now effective since that last meeting, is the Federal Implementation Plan, and that was really to replace minor NSR on Indian lands for the upstream oil and gas sector. Second one was the Source Determination Rule, which is aggregation as we all know it. That also is final as of August 2nd since the last meeting. And the third final rule that we talked about back in May was actually the new NSPS Quad OA for oil and gas. That one, while it is effective, it has been challenged. Excuse me, so we'll have to wait and see where the outcome of that one. But in the meantime, it remains effective. Proposed rules, control technique guidelines, that was for existing sources in those non-attainment areas or the northeast ozone transport region. That remains proposed. Another EPA proposed rule was the information collection request, and that remains in the proposed stage. If you remember on the ICR, that is actually the first attempt at regulating methane emissions from existing sources under Section 111D. The process for that, to begin that information collection request, they've got to, the EPA needed to send out a draft of their plan, publish a draft of their plan, and then take public comment on that for 60 days, and then republish their plan for an additional 30-day public comment period. And that second publication has not taken place yet. The Bureau of Land Management rule for oil and gas, waste prevention, production subject to royalties, and resource conservation rule remains proposed as well. So no movement on a lot of them, but those that are final are effective. So takeaways that we, stuff that I wanted to take away regarding the program evaluation of our existing oil and gas registration programs, just that it's been around a long time now. We're actually, this month is the 9th anniversary of actually implementing the program, which is super cool. But when we designed that program, we really knew that it wasn't going to stand the test of time, and we committed to revisiting it on a somewhat regular basis. And we just felt that it was time, given that the new federal rules were coming out, and our experience with implementing the program over the last 9 years just felt like right that it was time for us to take on a project to evaluate our existing program. So we shared that with you at the last CAAAC meeting. And our idea is really that what we're currently doing is, I'm sorry, I think I'm getting ahead of myself on that one. So in addition to the rules, what we wanted to take away is we're not only revisiting the program because of the federal rules that came out, but a big part of this program when we developed it was really the efficiencies that we saw that came with this program, both to the regulated community as well as the department. And we continue to strive to do more with less, and we think we can do better. And so we hope that was a takeaway. And then the third takeaway from the last CAAAC meeting was simply that, we're going to keep CAAAC involved. We're going to report out to you, and we're going to involve all stakeholders as we venture through this process. So a little bit on where we've been since that last CAAAC meeting. We've, of course, I'm here today presenting to you at CAAAC, so that's kind of a bad bullet, but after that, we were approached by our regulated stakeholders, and we were invited to attend 3 meetings put on by the Montana Petroleum Association, one in Sydney, one in Billings, and one in Shelby. And they basically asked us to come and present that same information that we presented to this group back in May. And it was very successful. I think we had representatives from our largest producers out there that have, 200 facilities out in the oil patch. We had folks on the oil side, we had folks on the gas side, we had all the way down to the small producers, mom and pop type facilities that are currently in our program. And then when we went up to Shelby, we also heard from folks that currently aren't in our program due to the older nature of the development up there, the more stripper well type facilities. And so we also heard from those folks and some potential concerns that we have here moving forward. So it was a wide range of folks. We had consultants there. We had a representative from Congressman Zinke's office showed up at the Billings meeting. So it was just really good meetings that we were able to attend and present at. Regarding the rural project, as far as what we shared last meeting, is that we really needed to compare our registration program against these existing rules that come out. We want to make our future program as efficient as we possibly can for everybody involved. So we needed to take on a project as far as identifying the most stringent, robust requirements from all these different rules, and our vision is that hopefully one day we can pull all those requirements into one rule and have that be Montana's program, so that we don't have ourselves or our regulated community or anybody else interested in air quality going to many different sets of rules for one source category, that they can just come to one place and know what they need to comply with. So I've tasked staff with putting together a spreadsheet identifying those requirements from all these different oil and gas rules that have come out. We're about 90% complete on that front, I would say. So the next steps moving forward that I see, first off, we need to complete that 90%, make it 100%. And then I see us pulling together a work group. And basically at this point, that work group that we envision would really be those affected by complying with these rules, and all we'd be asking them to do is truth test the rule requirements that we put together. Did we truly identify the most stringent requirements out of all those things? And we'd also like to start talking about efficiency needs. I've got a pretty good idea of efficiencies internal to the department, and I have some ideas external to the department too, because we don't only talk about this stuff at CAAAC. We're out there visiting with the companies that we regulate as well, but start to figure out where we need to go on the efficiency end of the program, both internal and external as well. And that is the update I have for the oil and gas registration program. Anybody have any questions? Anybody on the phone? Okay, no, thanks.
All right, thank you, Dave. Once again, pretty heavy lift. I think you see that in between the lines and what we're trying to accomplish there. Again, I'll just reiterate, collaborative effort. We really want to connect on this. This is very important as we move forward. We want to serve the state of Montana. So hear that. And we want to get better at what we're doing. And I think Dave shared that with you. We're going to move on to another monster big project now. And we're going to let Rebecca Harvich come and talk to us about a project that she's leading up as project manager once again from within our planning program. And that is our regional haze and how we can perhaps take on the regional haze program within the state of Montana. So Rebecca, why don't you come?
Okay, thanks Hobie, thanks everybody. As Hobie said, my name is Rebecca Harvich and I'm a planner within our planning section here at the Air Quality Bureau. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about regional haze today. So just to start with, some of you might be thinking, regional haze program, what the heck is that? And that's really fair enough because for a while now, regional haze in Montana has been a federal program. As you can see on the screen, we have been subject to a federal implementation plan since 2012 for regional haze. And that plan really consists of EPA's selected control measures for several of our large facilities in Montana. Now, you might also be thinking, here in Montana, we don't really like it when other people do things for us. We want to do things our own way, especially when that relates to energy and our economy. And so this presentation will focus on possible alternative path, maybe in the future, state control of the Regional Haze Program. So earlier this year, you may have heard that Governor Bullock released his blueprint for Montana's energy future, and that announced a plan to, quote, take back the Regional Haze Program from EPA. And so what that really means is looking at transitioning from that federal implementation plan to a state implementation plan. And so that was just a tiny little bullet point within this energy blueprint, and today I want to break that bullet down a little bit and introduce regional haze because many of us are new to it. I want to talk about what it means to take it over from EPA for an upcoming planning cycle, and then why all of you should care. So for some of you in the room even, this is old news. You've heard of regional haze. I just want to make sure that moving forward, everybody's on the same page, because a lot of us are very new to regional haze, myself included. So we will start today just with a little bit of background. I want to talk about what regional haze is, and that's basically visibility protection. So what is visibility and what causes impairment to visibility? Then we'll talk a little bit about the history of regulations related to visibility protection, starting with the Clean Air Act amendments in 1977. We'll look at the history specific to Montana, so what happened here, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we are today and end with our next steps. So really what I want to do today is sort of pique your interest in regional haze and assure you that we will be back in front of you with a lot more updates in the future, so please stay tuned and stay engaged in this process with us. Let's start with regional haze, visibility. What does that even mean? Well, you can see here that visibility is really about viewing objects at a distance. So when you look outside at the horizon, what can you see in terms of contrast, color, and texture in the mountains on the horizon? And so really regional haze is not just about how far you can see, but how well you can see at that distance. And so you can see in the bottom definition there, then we're shifting from visibility to visibility impairment, and what is that? And really what we're looking at is the difference between what we see when we go outside right now and what is a natural condition. So that basically translated means what naturally would visibility look like without any of the man-made pollution in the air. So those are just some definitions, and it's really easy to look at definitions on a screen. Doesn't necessarily translate to what you actually might see outside. So let's look at a couple pictures. These are some pictures that EPA had put out a webcam. These are from Glacier National Park, and these will show you some different levels of visibility. So for example, here's a great day. You might get something that is as bad as that. So that was most likely wildfire smoke in Glacier. But also visibility impairment might not be quite as extreme. It might just look like that. It's a little hazy on the horizon. So what we're really looking at is what causes that sort of haziness. So really when we look at haze, we're talking about particulate matter. And that might be primary particulates like nitrates, sulfates, carbon, dust, and it also might mean secondary particulates formed from precursors like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, VOCs, and ammonia. You can see in the definition at the bottom that sources of haze include major and minor stationary sources, mobile sources, area sources. One thing I would point out in this definition, it doesn't talk about natural sources, natural contributors, which in Montana wildfire smoke is definitely the most noticeable haze in our skies in the summer months. It's also really important to note that we're talking, that's not what I wanted to do, we're talking about sources that may have an imperceptible individual contribution to haze. So in the definition you'll see it talks about numerous sources located over a wide geographic area. And that's because these pollutants can travel a long way in the air. So they're not just necessarily coming from one source that's pumping out a huge smokestack. All of these things are adding together in the air, mixing around and causing haze. So now that we know what we're talking about when we say regional haze, I just want to jump into a quick history of the regulations, bring us all up to speed. And like I said, we'd start with the 1977 Clean Air Act amendments. So really, the federal government has been thinking about this for a long time, dating all the way back to 1977. Out of the 1977 amendments, we got the reasonably attributable visibility impairment regulations. You might have heard that called RAVI. And really the goal back then was to fix existing haze and prevent any future haze from man-made sources. And so what that meant was looking at improving visibility on the worst days and making sure that our best days don't get any worse, so seeing no degradation on best days. We then had the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, and out of that, the 1999 Regional Haze Rule. And so what that rule did was really established a comprehensive visibility protection program for Class 1 federal areas. And the goal of that program was to clean up visibility to quote-unquote natural conditions by the year 2064. What all of this means is that we're not just looking at visibility as we walk down the street in Helena today. What the Regional Haze Program was really established to do was to protect the pristine nature of our national parks, wilderness areas, wildlife refuge. And so let's just quickly look at where those are. You can see on this map they are predominantly in the west. We have an overwhelming number of the mandatory federal Class 1 areas in the western US. There are 156 of those areas that are subject to this regional haze rule. And these are really our national treasures. These are, like I said, national parks, wilderness areas. We have some wildlife refuges in Montana. And these were selected for protection due to their great scenic importance. They're places we love to go, we love to see our views. So we wanted to protect the visibility in those places. We do have 12 mandatory federal Class 1 areas in Montana. You can see them on this map. And just as a note, this is compared to some states that don't have any, or that maybe just have a few Class 1 areas. So getting back to our history of visibility protection, all of this is really to say that regional haze isn't new, it's just new to us. And that's because after the regional haze rule was published in 1999, states started planning how to protect visibility in their Class 1 areas. And so that rule directed states to develop state implementation plans, or SIPs, and submit those to EPA for approval. For a combination of different reasons, funding, staff availability, the plethora of other air programs that were coming out at the time, complexity of the modeling that has to go into this, Montana actually withdrew our efforts to submit a SIP in 2006. So that brings us right back to where we started this presentation, which was in 2012, as a result of Montana withdrawing their efforts to submit a SIP, EPA published a FIP, Federal Implementation Plan. And that plan included emission limits for several Montana sources that were determined to be impacting visibility in our Class 1 areas. You can see those in the table at the bottom of the slide there. So you can see under control type, a handful of those facilities received what is known as BART, or Best Available Retrofit Technologies. And as I said, these were determined by EPA to be the most reasonable controls to apply at these sources. You might also notice that for some of them it says remanded in parentheses, and what that's referring to is that in 2015, after a court case, the courts actually sent the controls for coal strip units 1 and 2 and the Correct plant back to EPA. They decided that the selection of control technology for NOx and SO2 at those facilities was arbitrary and capricious. So that is actually still sitting with EPA currently. We're not sure what the outcome of that will be as we move forward. So that's just a quick history of where we've been with regional haze. So a little bit about where we are today. After EPA and states started implementing their control plans, visibility did improve across the nation. So what you can see in this map is the darker blue indicates more improvement between 2000 to 2004 and 2010 to 2014, so over a 10-year period. Almost all of the country has improved its visibility. What I do want to point out is one thing this map doesn't show is that the eastern United States had a lot farther to go to improve visibility. So one of the reasons you might notice that it looks like there's a lot more improvement there is because in the west we had comparatively good air from the beginning. So we've improved, but maybe not to the same degree. Another thing this map shows you is the gray areas, and those are areas where there has been only minimal improvement or minimal degradation in that same 10-year period. So across the whole United States, visibility improvement since that baseline period has been due in large part to just a continuing decline in emissions over time. So in Montana, for example, some of our facilities are already being controlled by those retrofit technologies that were identified in the FIP. Others are better controlled today due to other EPA regulations, better technologies in general. And then others have shut down. So we mentioned on the last slide, you saw the Corrette facility has been shut down. Others that EPA talked about in the FIP were the Columbia Falls Aluminum Company, Smurfit Stone, and Missoula. Those have also shut down since the baseline of Regional Haze program. So despite all of these improvements, you might be wondering then, okay, why are we still talking about Regional Haze? We're improving, it's getting better. Well, actually, we're not done. The Regional Haze rule has us looking toward the year 2064 and moving in the direction of what is known as natural conditions. And so you can also see on this map, we do have some areas in Montana that maybe haven't seen a lot of change since the baseline. So those areas in gray, you can see kind of in the northeastern part of the state, and then there's a little gray area near Yellowstone. Those are some areas where we still maybe need to do a little more work. And for those reasons, there's been a lot of recent activity around Regional Haze that you may have seen in the news. We did already talk about Montana's energy future, that blueprint that the governor released this summer. We also saw proposed changes to the Regional Haze rule from EPA this summer, as well as new guidance documents related to those changes. And the comment periods on both the proposed changes and the guidance closed in August. We're still waiting for final versions from EPA. But really the thrust of the proposed revisions to the Regional Haze rule was EPA trying to better target man-made impacts to visibility. So trying to figure out how we can take out the natural impacts. So if you think back to Kristen's presentation about wildfire smoke, she talked about exceptional events and how we flag certain days that are impacted by wildfires. Well, part of these revisions are EPA really looking at how do we better account for states that are heavily impacted by wildfires and make sure that we as a state aren't required to clean up our visibility when it's being caused by something we can't control, like wildfires. So another piece of that proposed revision to the Regional Haze rule is a proposed delaying of the due date for our next plan revision. So currently, as the rule sits today, a SIP revision would be required in 2018. That is proposed to be pushed back to 2021. But again, those are still proposed, and we are waiting for EPA to figure out which way that's going to go. Are we going to have more time? Is it just going to be a couple years from now? We're not sure yet. So moving right along that timeline, you see that in 2017, there's a progress report due. And it says it's a progress report due on the Montana FIP. And so we do have questions there, whether that is going to be EPA, who's doing a progress report on their federal implementation plan, or whether maybe Montana, to set ourselves up for planning into the future, we want to do a progress report. We also have the start of the second implementation period coming right up in 2018. And so the big question really is it time for Montana to be in the driver's seat for that next implementation period? As you saw earlier, Governor Bullock seems to think so, and we've heard from some of you over the years that maybe it's time to do so. So we've been looking into it. And on that note, really what our Regional Haze project is starting with understanding. We need to understand what the federal Regional Haze program looks like, and the timeline, the resource needs, Air Quality Bureau activities associated with implementing that program on the state level. So we really need to know what has changed since 2006 when we decided not to submit a state implementation plan. Between then and now, that maybe do we have the ability to take that back at this point? Do we have the funding, the right staff, the time, the partners, maybe the desire to take that back? So that's our first step. Oops, I meant to have that up there for you, sorry. And then if the answer is yes, if enough things have changed and we decide now's the time to submit a state implementation plan, our next step is going to be developing that plan. And then after that, we'll have to implement the regional HAZE program into the future. So I mentioned that the second implementation period starts in 2018, but that is a 10-year period through 2028. And then, like I said earlier, we're always looking out toward 2064 and getting to natural conditions by that date. So fortunately, we have a really great team pulled together. As Hobie mentioned, I'm managing that project. We also have planners, modelers, meteorologists, we have permitters, engineers, lots of great people working on this project all together. We also have a whole bunch of great stakeholders. And so obviously, you've probably come to the conclusion this project isn't going to be simple, but it also certainly won't be an internal effort. We'll be working with many stakeholders, many interested parties throughout the process, not limited to the ones on this slide. And I think, of course, stakeholders will be different depending on what point we are at in the process. For example, writing a progress report might require a different stakeholder group and a different effort than modeling the emissions from various facilities. So really, what will it take? Understand, develop, and implement seem really simple and they make a nice soundbite. But really, what does regional HAZE entail, and why should you even care? And really, what it's all about is going to be measuring man-made haze in Montana, figuring out where those emissions are coming from, and then controlling those emissions into the future. So implementing the plan that we write. And really, I think all of us in this room care because we don't know yet what facilities we're going to have to look at in this second round of planning. We do know that we've made progress, as we saw in the map earlier, and that's good, but again, EPA has made it clear that we're looking at natural conditions and continual progress toward those natural conditions. So we're not off the hook just because we improved a little bit since 2000. We also saw on the map that we have some areas in Montana that haven't seen a whole lot of improvement. So we'll be looking at figuring out why that is and what we should do about it. And then finally, we're probably going to be looking at emissions coming from small sources that don't individually make a big difference in visibility, but that contribute to a regional problem with numerous other small sources. So what types of controls will be reasonable for those sources in the future? The bottom line is that yes, the governor identified taking back the regional HAZE program in his energy blueprint. And taking back that program will put Montana in a better position to control their energy future. But we also have places like Glacier National Park. And those are the real reason for the visibility protection in the first place. So you may have noticed that we still have a lot of question marks and a lot of things that we're going to be working to understand. It's a brand new project for most of us. Plus we have all the proposed changes from EPA on top of that. So I really hope that all of you will stay engaged as our stakeholders. We'll continue to provide updates to you as we go through the process. And then please just keep your eyes open for future stakeholder gatherings as we start to pull people together. And I did leave a stack of cards for anyone in the room. They're on the table outside. For everyone on the phone, my contact information is on the screen. So I'll take any questions you have at this point and try to answer them.
What's making Yellowstone Park so lousy? All the geysers and stuff, buffalo rolling around the asphalt.
For those on the phone, you won't catch the humor, but we have a question about what's making Yellowstone Park not improve, I guess, and we don't know that yet. That's something we'll be looking at.
We will in Montana.
Yeah, so part of the regional HAZE program, and I didn't touch on this specifically, is looking at the Class 1 areas within our state, and then also looking at Class 1 areas in neighboring states that might be impacted by the emissions coming from sources in our state. Anyone else? Anyone on the phone? Questions? Great, thanks.
Is it starting to sound pretty ambitious? We think so too.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Within that context, we want you to know that we are not relenting in any way on our efforts to serve you in terms of permitting applications and being timely in those functions that we see as our core functions. Those are not being diminished. We're not going to challenge those at all. So we want to continue to give you good and even better service on into the future with those kinds of things, our turnarounds with our inspections and things of those nature. So yeah, it's pretty darn ambitious, and we realize that. We also realize that our opinion, underscore again, and we think we've heard from many of you that Montana issues are best handled from within Montana, and that's reflected notably in the Regional Haze Program and in others as well. So that's the way we want to attack that. When we're done here, we'll talk just a moment about how we need your help in that, more than what you've already heard. So part of the process. We also think right now we have an incredible staff, and that's the reason we're able to take this ambitious venture on into our future. We have some great people working here, and one of the champions of our people has been for a little while, is going to make our last presentation, because no, we're not quite done yet. We have a little bit more for you that we're looking at now. So one of our champions, Julie Markle, our permitting supervisor, is going to come and anchor us out for today in another very important project that we're embarking on right now.
Okay, thanks, Hobie. As Hobie said, I'm Julie Merkel. I'm the permitting section supervisor, and it's always hard to follow Rebecca, especially if she has something really super exciting to talk about, like regional haze or the clean power plant or all our other things. Does this work? So that being said, though, I'm really proud of the permitting section and everything that we do there, and we're always trying to be better. Hobie indicated before that our bureau is always looking at ways to do things in a better way, and the permitting section is all on board with that. When we have a little downtime, maybe the permitting load isn't that high, my folks are always constantly looking for ways to make our everyday jobs more efficient and work with other sections so that we can work together to get better products out the door. So you can see the title here is Efficiencies in Air Quality Permitting. We have a lot going on, but I'm going to talk about two projects that we have specifically. So first of all, the sage-grouse project. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. This stems from the governor's executive order that was implemented starting January 1st of this year. I can't believe it's almost been a year that it's been in place, but these are the key players on this project. And really right now, what the project is, it's getting our workflow program so that we can track the permit actions that we're seeing that are in sage-grouse territory, and so that we can eventually produce reports for Carolyn Syme who's the head of the sage-grouse program. We can give her reports in a year or 5 years or whatever, of all kinds. We don't have to go back digging through files. We can just run a report and hand it over and tell her what we've done. I will say that I think all of the activities we've seen so far are portable sources moving in to sage-grouse territory. And they've gone through the system. They haven't had to wait to do their work. It's gone really smoothly so far. But I have to back up a little bit. Craig Hendrickson and Lonnie Patterson spent countless hours with Carolyn Syme to address the Air Quality Bureau and what we do and get some exceptions approved by the sage-grouse oversight team. First one isn't really an exception, the routine maintenance and repair. We just wanted confirmation that does not require a consult from the sage-grouse oversight team or the sage-grouse program. But the three exceptions are the activities that don't increase the footprint or don't, like if you put a new boiler in a building that's already existing, you don't have to go through the sage-grouse program to get approval for that. That one's if there's ever any question there, just give us a call first and we'll talk you through if you think you need to go through the sage-grouse program first. Also administrative actions, if there's a name change and a responsible official change, definitely don't have to go through this Sage-Grouse program there. And any Title V action. Title V actions are mostly administrative. Anything substantive would have gone through the MAQP process first of all. So that is that. I just really want to give kudos to Craig and Lonnie for all the work they put into it and are still putting into it. So the next program I have titled Permitting Program Improvement Project. So it sounds like a really, really big lift. But we can always improve what we do, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. I can't say this is a new thing, but it is time for change. Our world is changing around us, and we have to try to keep up with it. These are the key players, but there's going to be a lot of other people that are called in to help us out as necessary. So we're trying to find a new way to do business because we're a fee-based program, as most of you know, and our universe of permitted facilities is changing. Large and small facilities are shutting down, or partially shutting down, and our fee structure is will it keep up with that? I don't know. So we may be looking at a different way to collect fees. We want to streamline the process while maintaining protection of the air quality. So what makes sense for us to do? Our registration program for oil and gas has been greatly successful. And yeah, they're going through some changes because they've seen what works and what needs to be improved. So we're looking at them for guidance. Do we want more registration or permit by rule type for source categories, or maybe a general permit program? Or do we maintain permitting the way that we're doing it today? And really the way we're looking at it is it's all of those things. Definitely the Title V sources, the larger sources for now, are going to have to continue permitting as we do it today. So I am talking about minor sources for now as we move on here. So I can't say, like I said, this isn't really a new thing. We've been talking about doing this type of permitting for at least 13 years, probably longer. So we've done a lot of research. We've researched what we did as a bureau long ago. We've looked at the registration program. We've looked at other states' programs. There's a lot of states that have general permitting programs out there. We've researched what they've done, and then EPA recently passed a rule. The rule just went final a couple weeks ago or last week. That they have a general permit program for 6 different source categories in Indian country. But we're not other states, and we're not EPA. And so what makes sense for Montana? Well, first of all, we have to look at Montana's statutory requirements. Things like MEPA. Other states don't have MEPA requirements, but we do. Definitely we have to address that, whether it's a source category programmatic MEPA analysis, or if we still do it case by case. Also, public involvement is extremely important to us. We've looked at, and this list here is just, like it says, a few considerations. We've talked endlessly about a lot of other things as well. Removing case by case back, does that make sense? Maybe for crusher and screening source category, maybe that makes perfect sense for them because they're so standardized. Again, maintaining public involvement and keeping track of where people are, like the portable sources, as I keep mentioning, they move around. There's still a compliance component to this, and field services sections may be out in the field more often. So we need to have some way to keep track of where folks are operating. And there's also the stakeholder involvement. This is also very important to us. So the benefits of this, well, we want to offer a cost-effective way to do permitting. We want it to be easier and more efficient, a simpler and quicker way to get your permit out to the sources, especially if they're standardized. Can we set up a certain source category and that has all the same requirements and put them under a general permit, have them get a general permit. What we need to do internally, though, is maybe make some decisions. Like I said, we've done a lot of analysis over a lot of years, and we need to get over analysis paralysis and move forward. we need to decide what we need as a program, but we also definitely want to know what industry wants and what works as a truly streamlined process. We don't want to change just for the sake of change. We don't want to, change to a different process and it takes longer and more resources to conduct the program. Do we need rulemaking or rule changes? We need to make these decisions. Stakeholder involvement, when does that occur? We need to decide when is the best time for that. We don't want to have a meeting to just have a meeting, but we don't want to get so far down the road that we haven't asked the right questions to the right people and had their involvement. Eventually, we need to establish supportive fee structure to support the changes that we do make. And we really need to adapt to the change that's occurring into our industrial world. So that is what we have going on. And I would really, really appreciate if anybody now or at any time gives me a call if they have ideas, concerns, questions, or anything else. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. And this brings us to the tail end, so I'm willing to entertain any questions, suggestions, thoughts, feedback, heartburn, at least as it applies to air quality in that respect. Anything on your mind that we can share right now?
I'm just curious, is there some kind of a schedule for the oil and gas production air quality regulations review?
I'm going to hand that over to Dave Aguirre. So Kevin Matthews has asked us, is there any kind of a schedule for the regulation review for oil and gas?
I would say pulling together a team to evaluate what we put together probably inside a month.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So some of the thoughts and things that you're doing and positions that you're at, like regional haze, for example. So the question is, what changed since '06? Do you got any of that in paper? I mean, is there anything other than that line on the PowerPoint? I mean, is there work done in those areas that, I mean, I guess it would seem to me that comment would be valuable from my perspective earlier instead of later. I'm just wondering.
Restate your question,
Well,
please.
when you talked about the next step, for example, in regional haze and taking up the program and determining numbers, right? One of the things that this young lady said was, what changed since '06 when the state decided not to? My question, that's just an example, but my question really is there any of those phases, any of those thoughts, like an analysis? Is it on paper yet, or is it just discussion points within that bureau?
Let me talk a little bit about process. Since we gave it back, or didn't do what we were supposed to do, we have been basically asked almost every single day, every single meeting, when we're going to get back in this game, right? And so we have put a lot of thought into when we would take it back and how we would take it back. And in fact, I think when we gave it to EPA, that was contemplated in some of the exchanges between us and EPA about what we would need when we decided to take it back in terms of funding and other expectations and non-regional haze air quality actions that we expected from EPA, approval of SIPs, action on SIPs, those types of things. When this came out, the governor absolutely, don't have to read between the lines, wants to make sure that Montana's in the driver's seat for its energy electrical future. So the governor's office, just by way of a little bit of how the Federal Clean Air Act works, the governor owns these plans. The governor submits these plans. And so the governor's office is very much in the lead on this. Now we, of course, are doing the technical analysis, but we haven't gotten too far in terms of doing a lot of that analysis because it's a fairly recent unveiling publicly that we're taking it back, even though we've been asked about it for years. And exactly how we engage EPA with the report that's due in 2017, some of the remaining BART decisions that need to be made, certain other disclosures that have been made this summer. All of those pieces, I think, will fall into place here pretty quickly. And then we will be able to do some of the technical analysis in terms of inventories and whatnot. Now, that's not to say things have not been done, because there have been regional efforts through the Western Regional Air Partnership RAP in terms of quantifying emissions from different sectors and impacts on regional haze and those types of things. So there have been a lot of technical analysis being done. We have not done any through the years. Once we lost funding for giving this program back and decided to not move forward, aside from modifying our smoke management program, we haven't done a darn thing with it. If that kind of gets it, you probably got at your question, Dave, and a little more. But we need to see what's going to happen. I mean, we're SO2 designations, we've got a new 1 hour NO2 standard recently, 1 hour SO2 standard, there's an ozone standard. There are frequent reviews of other standards, there are other regulatory schemes coming into effect, and so I'm very hopeful from a technical perspective that the plan submittal gets delayed a couple years so that we can realize what impact all of those regulatory schemes have, so that we can properly then look at regional haze. That's something we tried to advocate for in the previous planning cycle. So to put a finer point on this, Rebecca Harbich, I mean, as this goes along, that is the project manager that we've identified. And those are really good questions to be sure and call her on.
That's why the phone numbers are
It's an insightful question, Dave. Thank you. Any other questions, insights? Hearing none, then I'll close this out with just a word about the CAAAC process, and then I'll tell a story on myself and a bit of irony, if you don't mind. So first of all, this CAAAC meeting, once again, was principally us talking at you. And frankly, that is not our goal for this CAAAC. We do want to spend as much time as is necessary and valuable to you all as stakeholders in this process to inform you to the degree that's possible for us what we're doing and why we're doing it, why we think that's important. But that's only part of the equation here. We need to hear from you. And I'll just underscore that as well today. We need to hear from you and from anybody who's interested in the state of Montana, in air quality in the state of Montana and the regions round about. There's no way we can follow on with this process just by ourselves, and we really don't want to. We want to serve the state of Montana. So we would like, as CAAAC moves along, to, yes, inform you as much as possible, but we would like to engage you and connect with you more and more and more. So we'll just set that up for your thought and consideration as we move ahead. You may remember, pardon me, a while back, Rebecca sent you out a questionnaire. We talked a little bit about an executive committee, for instance. And perhaps there are folks who would like to work with us to plan these meetings. What would be valuable for you? Perhaps you have a presentation that you'd like to make, something you need to communicate to the larger body. And we're very open to that. We'll talk to you about that if there's interest. And we can move forward in that regard as well. So lots of opportunity, but please hear sincerely from me, we want to hear from you. We want to be transparent. We want to know what your needs are, what your questions are, what your concerns are. And even if you have negative feedback, and perhaps especially if you have negative feedback, Hobie, grow some hair, I don't care. But we'd love to hear it. Okay, so please, please, please feel free. Yes, we've got an awesome staff, but they're very personable people. I would love to work with you on any occasion for any of these topics. So I'll leave that open to you. Next CAAC meeting probably in December. We'll see how that works out. We're kind of thinking about anticipating the legislature. Dave gave you a heads up about that. We seem to think that might be a great time to do that. We understand, however, that December is a very busy month for all of us typically. So we'll stay in touch about that. Most of the correspondence that comes from us, we vet together and then comes from Rebecca, so please pat her on the back as you leave today and thank her very much. Again, I pretty much just ride on her coattails, and that's the way this thing works. So also, if you would please give thanks to Brandon McGuire back here, who is making some of our technology possible, along with some of our IT folks, and has contributed in other ways you can't even see. He, for instance, has been involved in helping us with smoke season. And so give him a pat on the back if you would. Now, here's the personal irony story, and I'll let you go home. So for 2 weeks, I've been telling all of our presenters, don't forget the folks on the phone. Over and over and over. Don't forget the folks on the phone. So it was with a great deal of embarrassment, the very first thing I did was forget the folks on the phone. So if you're on the phone today, again, I sincerely apologize to you. And if you feel like writing a nasty email, please feel free to do that. I'm going to tell you it's unnecessary because all the presenters are going to flog me bloody for encouraging them to not forget, and then I forgot. So my apologies. Thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon. I know you're very, very busy, so we appreciate it. Please go look up that organizational chart, call us, email us, engage with us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much.